Lesson 6B, fortunately, is quite a bit shorter than Lesson 6A. That was a little bit long yesterday. I apologize for that 16-minute podcast. This should be a little bit quicker because I only got 3 slides to go through. And it's pretty much we're reviewing. Okay? Let's go back here. Story problem. Your school is building a raked stage. The stage will be 30 feet long from front to back with a rise of 2 feet. That means the stage is placed at an angle that's lower in front and higher in back. You want the rake angle of elevation to be 5 degrees or less for safety. You don't want actors falling and rolling down the stage and landing in the audience because actors kind of, they kind of stand here. And if that angle is too steep, they're going to go tumbling down onto the floor, which wouldn't be so good. Okay? Wouldn't want that. The question is, have I kept that angle with a 30-foot depth and a 2-foot rise? Is that angle less than 5 degrees or not? Now, pretty simple trig problem. Because I've got a right triangle here. This is the unknown angle I'm trying to find. We'll call that angle x because it's x degrees. And I know what sides with perspective to that angle. 30 feet is the hypotenuse, and 2 is the opposite. The adjacent side is down here. We don't know anything about that. Okay? So given the way that this is labeled, do I have a 5-degree angle or less? I have to solve for the angle. The angle is unknown, but we're going to start by setting up our equation. Since I have the opposite and the hypotenuse, opposite hypotenuse using SOHCAHTOA, opposite hypotenuse gives me sine. So we're going to choose a sine function. The sine of my angle equals the length of the opposite over the length of the hypotenuse. In order to find the angle, I'm going to have to use the inverse function. The inverse function is what we use when the angle is unknown. So, calculator, second function sine, make sure you see that sine inverse in your calculator, sine -1, 2 divided by 30. If you want to reduce that to 1 over 15, it's not going to make a difference. It tells me that angle is about 3.8 degrees. And I have a wonderfully raked stage that is safe. It's a 3.8 degree angle of elevation. There we go. I have solved that problem using trig. Solve the triangle. Find x, y, and z given these sides. Give approximate measures to the nearest tenth when necessary. So, again, this is a problem that we've dealt with before. Finding the 3 sides. Since I know 2 sides, how am I going to find that third side? X. Oh yeah, if I know 2 sides of a right triangle, finding the third side is easy because we use Pythagorean theorem. So 17 squared plus 31 squared equals x squared. And why is the x over here by itself? Because that is the hypotenuse of the triangle. The hypotenuse is always the one that's by itself in Pythagorean theorem. Now 17 squared is 289. 31 squared is 961. When I add those together, I get 1,250 equals x squared. Well, I do know, so x is the square root of 1250. Now, because it ends so nicely in 50, I know 25 is going to go in there evenly. In fact, $25 is going to go in there again, so it's 625 times 2. So 25 times 50, that's 5 root 50. But root 50 simplifies again, 5 root 25 root 2. So that's 5 times 5 root 2, or 25 root 2. That's the exact length of that side. Now that I've got that, I can solve for angles x and y. Y and z. So we have to pick an angle to solve for. Let's pick angle y here. Let's pick y. If y is my perspective, this is the hypotenuse, this is the opposite, this is the adjacent. What function am I going to use using my given value? So this is my caution one. I don't want to use that one if I don't have to. Give you my given values. I have the opposite and adjacent. What function do I use, and how do I solve for y? That's going to be your task. I want you to set up and solve the function for y. And once you found y, also find z. That's your first little quiz problem today. Here's another one. Solve the right triangle. I've given this time the right angle and one other angle, so this time finding the third angle is the easy part. This has to be 38 degrees because these three angles have to add up to 180. Next, I need to choose to solve one of my sides, either YZ or XY. And just for the simplicity's sake, I'm going to call these sides A and B. I'm going to give them variable names. They didn't have variable names, but that's the beauty of variables. We can just create it. I have to pick a perspective, which is going to be clear. It's kind of given to me which perspective we want to choose. This is going to be it, which means this is the hypotenuse, this is the opposite, and this is the adjacent. Now that I know all that, I can start setting up my equations. Sine of 52 is the opposite over hypotenuse. So it's A over B. Oh, that's not going to help me at all, is it? Because I have two variables. That's okay. Move on. Cosine of 52 is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, which is 8.5 over B. Oh, I can solve that because the variable's in the denominator there. Pretty straightforward. I swap those two. So B equals 8.5 over cos 52. And we just plug that in our calculator. $13.8. I've solved B. Now I look onto tangent function. Tangent 52 is opposite over adjacent, A over 8.5. Oh, we can solve that. There's just one variable. Multiply both sides by 8.5. I get 8.5 tan 52 equals A. So 8.5 tan 52 give me 10.9. And I have solved that entire triangle. I now know all three sides. I know all three angles. That triangle is solved. One last question for you today. Suppose another rake stage is only 20 feet long front to back with a rise of 2 feet. So I'm going to give you a picture. It's 20 feet right here with a 2-foot rise here. The question is, what is the angle of rise for this stage? So given that picture, we need to find this angle. That is your final task of the day.